Hi there. My name is D.G. Valdron. This is my attic. I'm a writer. These are my books. And occasionally I do YouTube videos. So welcome. Here we are. Today, I want to talk about The Primevals, a movie that has just come out recently. And if you're a nerd like me, you've been hearing about The Primevals for most of your life. It's been around for a long time. Um, Here's the good and the bad. It's not actually a good movie. I'm sorry. But it is out, and there's something wonderful about that. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the story of this movie, and then we'll go on to the review, what went wrong and what went right. And, just kind of like move on. So The Primevals actually begins in 1968. This is a movie that's been in gestation for 68 years in production and development hell. That may be some kind of record. And it all starts with a group of stop motion animators, David Allen, Dennis Murin, and Jim Danforth. Now, the big ones, of course, are Harryhausen and O'Brien. But, stop motion animation, it was actually a fairly small field. So, there were only a few guys working in it and really building a reputation and building a name. And so, if you're kind of a nerd for these sorts of things, you know who these guys are. Anyway, so they had this idea. They had this idea of a lost colony of Vikings that are being menaced by lizard men. Okay. And they actually went to Hammer Film Studios, the people who were doing their Dracula movies and their Frankenstein movies. Every now and then, Hammer actually experimented with something different. So they did, when dinosaurs ruled the earth with stop motion. And they pitched this idea, which was originally called Raiders of the Stone Ring. And they did some shooting. They did some test footage of their lizard men and their Vikings and their Viking tree houses and forts and stuff. And they actually did a kind of short film. It was a wraparound. You can find it on IMDb, and you can actually find some stills, but I don't know if the actual film itself is available. Apparently, there might be some rights issues because some of the actors involved, nobody knows who they are. Anyway, so the story is basically, it's black and white. There's a bunch of men in tuxedos hanging around in the Explorers Club. They're, drinking brandy, smoking cigars. And one of them tells this story about how, he was flying along in a Zeppelin and it got attacked by pterodactyls and it got crash landed. And they encountered Vikings, who lived in these tree houses and scary lizard men. And at the end of it, in the wraparound scene, the guy is being mocked. So he pulls open his drawer and whoops, there's a severed lizard man hand in it. Yay. So it turns out the story was real. And so, the middle part, the flashbacks, all becomes an opportunity to, showcase all these stop motion animation test scenes and effect scenes that they were doing. Anyway, Hammer eventually went bankrupt or pulled out or lost interest, and David Allen just kept on with the project. It morphed into something called Zeppelins and Pterodactyls. What were they thinking? That's got to be the worst title ever. And then Glacial Empire, which was only slightly better, and then Primordium, the Arctic World. And by the 1970, it was eventually revised into its mostly current form and called The Primevals. Now, through the 1970s, of course, David Allen was pushing it. He's taken a lot of other animation jobs, and he can't quite get this going on. But by the 1980s, he hooks up with a fellow named Charles Band. Now, Charles Band, you might know, is famous for 1980s and 1990s DVD and VHS as the Full Moon Pictures guy. And he was responsible for the Transfers film series, the Demonic Toys, the Puppet Masters, a whole bunch of, wacky low-budget B-movies that helped fill the shelves. So that was who that guy was. Anyway, so Band and Allen started working on this project together, and eventually they were able to get some funding. And in 1994, they actually managed to do some principal photography. They got a cast together and they went out to Romania because Band was shooting a lot of stuff out in Romania because it was cheap or he had tax credits or something. There was some kind of special deal. If you look at a lot of the full moon movies from around that time, everything they were doing was being shot out in Romania. And they also shot some in Italy in the Dolomite Mountains and stuff. And then they ran out of money. And so the project died. But David Allen just kept on working at it. And this is the thing for Allen. It seems to have been, his passion project. He did all kinds of animation work. He did, the King Kong, driving off in a Volkswagen thing. He did bits and pieces of this and that. But this was the project that he seemed to love, that he seemed to keep coming back to. And so he died in 1999. And he passed on everything to his partner, Charles Endicott. And Endicott and Band took up the mantle. And they kept trying to get this movie made. And they were looking for money and not finding it. They were looking for resources and not finding it. And it's kind of frustrating to realize, you've got basically a lot of principal photography in the can. You've got a lot of models. You've got a lot of special effects footage. It's just needing to put it together, needing to go that last mile. Eventually, they did an Indiegogo funding campaign in 2018, and they got about $40,000 out of that. And in cinematic terms, not a big pile of money. But with that, they managed to get a lot of stop-motion animators like Kent Burton, a lot of other effects artists, special effects people who came on board, either for free or basically minimum scale to help finish it. And then a couple of years ago, they actually got it done. And they did the festival circuit. And eventually it got released on DVD with no fanfare at all. I mean, I'd been hearing about this movie for years, and I thought it would never get done. And then it just shows up on DVD, so I snapped it up. Now, the thing I like about this, and the thing you should appreciate about this as well, is that this was somebody's passion project. This was a labor of love. This is something they spent their whole life working on. And even after they died, somebody took up the torch and just kept on going. And there's something beautiful about that. There's something magnificent and meaningful. And so I can't think of this movie without thinking of that kind of thing. Now, is it a good movie? Not really. Here's the problem with it. I think that when they were trying to market it, they didn't have a whole lot of it. It's one of those special effects laden movies, so it's all these magnificent visuals, blah blah blah, matte work and things like that. You can't convey that. You can't actually, show your investors that. So you have to put it in the script. So throughout the whole movie script, we've got characters oohing and awing at each other and going, "Oh, wow, look at this magnificent thing." Well, we're actually seeing the things. We're seeing the exotic, magnificent things or whatever. So we don't need it. We should have had real dialogue there. We should have had real exchanges. And instead, what they filmed was a kind of placeholder script that was trying to get investors interested. So that's kind of a handicap. The whole thing feels like it reads like at a fourth grade level. And to be honest, the script is kind of thin, and it's shot in a fairly pedestrian way. So there isn't that extra oomph that would really, bring it to life visually. And it's got that 80s, 90s sort of B-movie sensibility. So, you can see the influences of Raiders of the Lost Ark and much better action films where they're trying to do sort of the same things or similar things on a budget. So the live action sequences, it's old-fashioned. It's kind of slow and old-fashioned. Where the movie really comes to life, to the extent it comes to life, is with the special effects sequences, some of which probably date back like 50 years. The lizard men look terrific. They do look and move like stop motion animation critters. There's a Yeti thing, a couple of scenes of that. And there is, kind of a fun sense of adventure. Anyway, so what's the bottom line here? I think when it finally got made, it was obsolete. I mean, what it comes right down to it is this sort of movie was obsolete 30 years ago when Jurassic Park came out. It was obsolete when CGI animation just took over everything. And all these old-fashioned guys, the stop-motion animators, are, really of a different age, a different era. There's a heavy nostalgia component to this, to watching this, And I think that if you see this as somebody's lifetime labor of love, you can appreciate that. If you are a fan of old-fashioned stop-motion animation, I think you can appreciate that. I mean, there is still stop-motion animation out there nowadays. You see it now and then, Kobo and the Six Strings, or Coraline, or Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas. They're sort of doing these things straight up. But this kind of merger, this old-fashioned monster movie with, stop-motion monsters and critters and just, trying for that old-style pulp adventure, where it's a bygone era. It's a shame that this movie has taken so long to get out. Because really, I think its era was like 20, 30 years ago at best. But still, the fact that it was this labor of love, that people picked up the torch and carried it on, I mean, I think that's genuinely beautiful. And so, even if it's not a good movie, I recommend it. I'm going to say, you know what? You have worse things to do with your life than to, sit down and take a trip down memory lane with this one. Anyway, thank you very much. Signing off. If you like, just hit like and subscribe. But mainly, just have a nice day.